Thanks for joining us tonight also on our live streams. We have some viewers from the internet, so thank you. Tonight our master gaffer is going to be Chris Rochelle right here. So let's start by giving him a nice warm welcome. He'll be assisted by Dane Jack, myself, Josh Lobbs, and Benjamin Ewing over there. So that will be the team tonight. But yeah, thanks. All right. So Chris has already started the process. He's actually picked up a little bit of color. So he's chosen a nice kind of neutral gray, and he's using a bar or rod. So it comes to us in a bar form, and we chop a little chunk off of that, and he's already preheated that into an oven at 1,000 degrees. Now he's picked it up on a blowpipe. So today, Chris is going to assemble this piece right here. A nice kind of intricate goblet with some tulips as our stem. So this one's all one color. We're going to use a couple different colors on the one tonight. I think right next to Amanda we actually have one that we'll make right there. It's charcoal, kind of smoky gray on top, nice green and cranberries in the middle. And at any point, if anybody has questions, just let me know. Same with any viewers online. Let us know. We'll answer your questions. So Chris is going to really get this rod nice and hot. He'll center that color, and then he'll also pop a bubble into that color. So Chris is our gaffer tonight. So he's the person in charge of the piece of glass. He's also in charge of the team that's helping out, so he's kind of like our quarterback tonight. He'll touch that color bar on the marvering it, centering, cooling, and shaping all at once. Now here we go. He'll start a bubble into that, creating a little pressure by blowing into the pipe, caps it with his finger. And this will be our foot, the bottom piece of our assembly tonight. So we're going to let this cool down a little bit. We're going to add one more layer of clear glass over the top of this. Chris right now is just letting that color cool down. If it goes and gathers too hot or too soon, it just could fall right back off in the clear glass. And we don't want this color to contaminate our clear. So Dane's taken over the pipe there. Chris has already assembled a few of the pieces earlier today. So he's made our tulip heads, our tulip stems, some of our leaves. And they're in our garage. So it's got a funny name, the garage, because you can park pieces of glass in there throughout the day, keeping them warm. So we pull out another piece of glass out of the garage, a sphere that he's made ahead of time. All right, so just a little game plan here. Chris is going to make us one of the stems to show us how that is made. And also, so we have a backup too, in case we have any failures or mistakes happening during the process. So he'll garage those two pieces right now, and we'll make one of those stems just in case. Is there any questions right now? Yeah. What causes the black coloring? So all different metal oxides will pigment the glass. So in your dark blue, you got cobalt oxide. Green, you got iron oxide. So in our black, there's no true black. It's either a really dark purple or really dark green. So purple, you got manganese. Green, you got iron oxide or sometimes chromium. So all comes down to different metal oxides from the periodic table. Now, I'll throw you for a question. What makes pink? Any guess? Anybody? Just shout it out. Gold. Yeah, great. Awesome. So gold will make a nice pink or cranberry color, gold chloride specifically. So it's usually one of the most expensive colors in glass. How about our online viewers? Any questions from those? All right. So Chris has got a little glass there. He's rolling through some powder, some think we got our nice cranberry color here. So we can use color in all different forms, either powder, frit, which is in granular form, or we can use bar or rod form. Benjamin is over there at the garage, just kind of keeping an eye on things. In the garage, there's also hot spots and cold spots. So if we keep the glass in those hot spots too long, it can start to slump or adjust to the shape that we have. Now, Chris has been blowing glass a long time, about 20 years. So it makes this look very easy. He's had a couple run-throughs of this throughout the past few weeks. So he's using a crimp tool there, just a flat one. And he's set up a little, kind of a little tool set over there, spoons. I know, they're not really tools, but he's got some spoons over there, and he'll press this glass against that, creating one of our tulip leaves. So here he goes. He'll lay it on there. He's got another spoon to press at the top of that. I know, really technical, right? So you can do a lot with a butter knife, a spoon, and a fork. You can make lots of different things in glass with those three things. We'll now pinch the back of that to create a little bit of a spine or profile to that leaf. What's the temperature of the oven? Yeah, great question. So our furnace is 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. The reheating chambers are also at that temperature. So we can adjust those if need be. So I think Chris actually a little bit ago had told Dane to adjust this reheating chamber a little bit, either a little colder or a little hotter depending on the gaffer's choice. But we're always working around those temperatures, 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. So we'll turn off the reheating chambers when we're done for the evening, but the furnace right in the center of the shop will never turn that off. That's like the heartbeat. It's got all the glass in there, about 1,000 pounds of glass. All right, so back to Chris. He's using a little bit of powder there. Give it a little bit of details here. Glass powder can give you a really awesome, realistic look to the glass. Also, if the powder's on the surface, sometimes you can get this matte finish too. All depends on your design. Yeah, question? Sorry. Yeah, how much energy is going into all of the steps and whatnot, how that compares to. I would say it's kind of like a long sprint. You know, your body is definitely at labor here, especially when things get very heavy, very complicated. Chris has spent a few hours ahead of time creating some of these parts also, so yeah. The heat energy, how much energy is going through here. So this is all natural gas equipment, so a lot of energy. Nowadays, most hot shops are running off natural gas. That's usually how they're run nowadays. Back in the day, it was all run off of either coal or wood. So someone got the not so fun job of shoveling coal and wood all day long. If you actually, behind our amphitheater, there's a little maquette of what an old glass factory would look like. They got a bunch of different reheating chambers in one kind of round building. All right, so Benjamin's going to babysit one of those leaves there. Dane has, I think, started a second one. A lot of the tools really haven't changed over the glassmaking history. Most of the things that have changed is the equipment behind us. Any other questions right now? No? All right, so we had a few questions come in from our online. How much raw material cost is it? It's a little bit over $1 or so per pound. Really, the cost comes to the melting the glass into its raw state. What was our second question, Amanda? Yeah, so why so much glass in our furnace? Well, we use this furnace every single day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we never turn it off. We never want it to get so low. There's 1,000 pounds of glass in there. When that tank is at 200 pounds, the tank is very, very low. We don't want to slide our pipes or punties very far into the furnace because they'll get very hot. And also, the bottom of the tank, the glass sometimes isn't at the best quality. So we always keep it somewhat full. On the bottom of the tank, we can run into something called cords, or the glass actually changes a little bit. The flux burns out. All right. So back to them. They've got the 3 pedals on there. Chris will adjust them. And he uses a hot torch there to kind of spot heat different areas. It's a natural gas oxygen mixture. We also have propane torches, this we call a fluffy torch. It's a much broader spot heating. So Chris just giving you a little bit of detail there to those leaves. It's all about the details of making glass. Giving him a little bit of gesture now. We got that nice, beautiful spine detail on the back of those leaves, too. Or petals, sorry. We have a beautiful shot there by our AV team. So one thing we'll always do when we're making glass is turning. If we ever stop turning, the glass, one, if it's hot enough, will actually fall on the floor. So we always are keeping that pipe rotating. So Chris will kind of score it there with his diamond shears. That way later we can get this off the iron. All right, so we had another question come in from our online. Is there a color out there after the glass cools, that would love to have that's not out there? But there's about 200 colors out there from companies like Reichenbach. It's a German company that makes a lot of colors. I was asking some of the guys up here, what's a color that we would love to have that's not out there? Most of them are out there. Dane was just telling me, there's not a true black, and I was talking about that earlier. We have colors that appear black, but there's no true black out there, just like paint. It's either a really dark green or really dark purple. Why isn't there a true black? Well, just like paint, there's no a pigment out there to create a black tint. There's things that can appear black. Let me come on over there to hear you, sorry. Yeah, so we actually put a powder on the surface. So he's using glass powder. It's a lot finer than frit, like you just said, yeah. So it adds a little bit extra detail. He wanted to create just a little bit of a realistic effect to these petals of these tulips. Yeah. Glass powder is amazing. You can do a lot with glass powder. Yep. So he'll make another piece here, rolling through that powder. Powder's great also because it gives you a really nice distribution of the color across the surface. But if you don't use enough of it, it also can thin out. So we're not blowing these pieces. These are solid pieces right now. If we stretch that powder, they can actually lose that color to pigment. So again, Benjamin is keeping an eye on everything in the garage right now. I think we're going to get ready to make this stem here. So in our stems, they actually have a little bit of texture. So Chris is probably going to go into an optic mold here, pushing the color into these condensed lines. Then we also have to create this nice, beautiful gesture. So Chris actually has a template over here he'll use in just a little bit to create this nice, beautiful curve or gesture to our stem. All right, so here goes. Goes into a bronze optic mold. And again, those create these thick and thin lines. And since that color is on the surface, it pushes that color into these thick and thin lines. So Chris is just twisting those lines. He's got a hold of the diamond shears, pulling that. He's watching the diameter, how fast or how thick it's pulling or how thin it's pulling, and is adjusting as necessary. He'll cut off that remainder there and give this nice, beautiful gesture. So he's got a template over here, a little piece of kiln shelf. He's got a little sketch or pencil drawing on that, so he can make sure he gets exactly the way he would like it. He'll fire polish that area that we cut free. Then he'll actually flatten that a little bit for the area for the tulip to sit on. To the reheating chamber. If we wait out the air temperature too long and let the glass cool too much, it will start to crack. So our cadence between the reheating chamber and the bench definitely picks up when things get complicated and intricate. Don't want the glass to cool too much. And really using that torch to spot heat that top there. We'll flatten a little bit there. We'll cut 3 little points into it. And then back to the reheating chamber. Using that torch again, really making sure those areas he wants to manipulate are hotter than everything else. I saw him just touch that torch back to the back area, the moil, we call it, everything left on the pipe or punchy. That's the area that tends to get coldest quickest. It's the last thing in the reheating chamber, it's the first thing out, so that typically gets colder there quicker. We'll pull these nice 3 points. And when we're ready, we'll add that nice tulip to that and take those 3 points and grab over that tulip. Is there any other questions right now? No? Yeah. Do we make our own raw glass? So we get it already pre-melted into a little, we call it cullet form. It looks like little ice cubes. Then we remelt it into its liquid state. Yeah, good question. Comes to us in 50-pound bags. We shovel that into there usually a few times a night, depending on the night, but yeah. There is a way to melt raw material, though, into glass called batch. So another different building here on our campus called the studio. It's across the parking lot. Some classes and other activities happen in that building. They melt raw material into glass. Yeah. Yeah, raw material. So silica sand, silicon dioxide, soda ash, and limestone. It comes to us already pre-mixed. We just shovel that in. So it usually comes to us from a company that mines it out of the Earth's crust. Silica sand is one of the most common found in the Earth's crust. So it's mined a lot around the world. But we usually get ours from North Carolina spruce pine. So it's a coefficient of 87, coefficient of expansion. So all right, here we go. So grab that tulip head. I'll land it down right where in that middle. Beautiful. What do you think? Should we give him a nice round of applause for that? Yeah. So now we'll adjust it a little bit. It's still freshly hot setting on there, so he'll give a little bit of gesture. And he'll spot heat those 3 points and make sure those land just how he'd like them to. Grab his tweezers. And then back to the reheating chamber. Some flashing by Dane. A flash is just that term we use for a maintenance heat. Letting the glass get too cold again will make it crack, so we got to flash the piece a few times in that reheating chamber. But if we stay in there too long, the whole thing can start to move, and we don't want that. Why don't we just keep it wet? On the torches and get it hot like that way? Yeah, and maintain the heat. Well, there's a lot of different temperatures running across that piece, and towards the iron, the moil we call that, that typically can get cold as quickest, so we could just sit there and torch that area, but everything else can get too cold. Sometimes we will do that. We'll use 2 torches and kind of really heat everything up, but really the best way to do it is use that reheating chamber. It's a nice even temperature in there. There's a computer holding a set point temperature. When we start assembling the entire goblet together, we'll probably use a few torches, torching specific areas. So you can see how much time goes into these small details. So that's why Chris assembled a few of these earlier today. Now when he made them, he made sure every single one is the exact same height, same gesture. That way when we set them on the piece, they all look symmetrical. He's finding his mark where he wants to actually score it or squeeze a line into that. That little quick measurement tells him where he needs to cut that free from the iron. And we won't actually cut it. We'll make a mark that we can actually break the glass. As much as a great glass blower Chris is, he's also an excellent glass breaker. So you got to find an area that you want to create a stress point or a weak spot that snaps the glass. We call it a jack line. Some people call it a neckline or a restriction line. But think of it like your chocolate Hershey's bar. You snap your little chocolate pieces. We'll essentially just snap the glass at that line. So there's that big torch called a fluffy torch. It's kind of heating everything for a few seconds. last minute details there. So over here we have Benjamin keeping a sphere warm. All right, Chris will put that in the garage. We'll park it. And we have kind of metal kind of shovels. We can kind of pick those pieces up out of there and bring them over to another piece of glass attachment. All right, so we're going to start to assemble this piece together now. We made one of those stems of the tulip on there, and we have, a few other ones made that were made ahead of time earlier today. So that's just the backup in case we need an extra. So Benjamin's going to bring over a little bit of clear glass and make it a little ovolio, we call it. It's a little bit of a kind of a transition piece of glass when you're adding parts. So we'll drop it on there. Chris will cut it free. And immediately Chris will start to shape and center that. Okay. So we'll add a blown foot to this. So earlier we picked up that color bar. Chris was doing that right in the beginning steps. Dane's already got that ready to go over there now. We'll add one more layer of clear glass over that. Quick trade-off with Dane there. All right, so can we roll that animation for gathering right now? So take a look at our monitor. So if we cut out the side of our furnace, that's what you'd see. A hemispheric pot, a crucible we call it, holding the glass, 1,000 pounds sitting inside that. Chris spools it up very much like honey or taffy. At that temperature of 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit, it acts similar to taffy or honey. So organize that fresh layer by using a block. It's a wooden shaping tool. It's made out of cherry wood, soaked in water its entire life. The water creates a layer of steam in between the glass and the tool. So really, it's not touching the wood until that moisture is gone. As soon as that moisture is gone, the wood starts to burn. So we'll keep that in the water its entire life. Those tools can last months up to years. The small ones, they last, let's say 6 to 8 months because we use them for almost everything. Now the larger ones, these don't get replaced very often because we don't use them on every single piece. So you can see I'm starting to stretch that. We'll create our blown foot shape. We'll squeeze a jack line into that. And we'll create somewhat of a, sometimes I like to call it like a Hershey's Kiss shape. So we'll trade it off with Dane here. Dane will get that bubble hot again, and we'll drop our bubble, called a dropped blown foot. All right, so watch here. Dane's got that nice and hot. He'll stop turning. Chris will grab a hold. He'll guide it down. He's blowing slightly as well. He'll touch it down. Make sure nice contact. Pull up a little bit, and he'll blow, and he'll cut free. Beautiful. Just, that's a nice round of applause. Just doing that move in itself takes many, many years of practice. Again, Chris has been blowing glass 20 years or so he's got a lot of practice. Now that bubble is closed, so we need to get that bubble open here in just a little bit. He'll center it right now. And he'll start squeezing another jack line or restriction line into that. He'll also push the bubble back towards itself, making it wider. And in a moment, we'll break the glass from that spot. So right now he just squeezes that to reinflate the bubble. A little compressed air there cools that jack line down. And then he'll grab a hold here, squeeze, and our assistant, Benjamin, will tap it, pop it right off. There it is. So we've got it open now. You're going to get this real nice and hot. Chris is going to open this nice and flat to a beautiful foot. Chris, are you going to fold the lip on this?
Yeah, I'm going to pop that a little bit.
Okay. So Chris has been making this a few times the past few weeks, so we kind of have an idea of the steps that he does. He'll fold the lip on this, creating a double lip effect. He'll also use this tool called a soffietta. It's a blowing tool. We can plug the hole and blow through the tube, expanding the shape again. Since we're not on a blowpipe anymore, there's no way for us to blow through that rod. So that tool is a great adjustment. Now we can see inside our chamber there, and that's possible because of Corning in 1934. There's a special glass developed called fused silica, just pure silicon sand melted together. What that does is it has a lot of properties retaining to heat, so we can put that little piece of fused silica in our reheating chamber and have a camera look behind that directly into the reheating chamber. Fused silica was developed in 1934. There wasn't a lot of use for it until the space age. 1950s, NASA approached Corning and asked if there was a window that we could put on our spacecrafts. Nowadays, we also use it for fiber optics. So Chris has got that foot nice and wide. He'll paddle against Benjamin's paddle there slightly, creating a nice gesture profile to that foot. All right, so they're going to add a little punny patch there. Just a little insurance for later. We're going to attach another punty to that area. Sometimes we can either scallop out the piece when we're taking it off when we're finished. Also, we can take away some color too. So this will give us a little insurance that we don't scallop out the color or the piece. So Chris is just talking to Dane here about the next few steps.
No, go ahead. Shape it up, and then let it cool a little bit and get the tip of it.
All right, so Dane has started the punty. It's a little bit of glass as a temporary handle to hold on to the entire object. This step is all about the 3 T's of blowing glass: timing, temperature, and teamwork. Now don't forget them. Now, so if your timing and temperature is off just a little bit, we can have a floor model. We don't want those. So Dane is cooling that glass by marvering it across that metal surface known as the marver. He's chilling it to a point where it's still sticky, but it's not going to fuse to the bottom of the foot. All right, so there's the head nod from Chris. He'll take one more final flash on the foot. Dane will take a quick flash on the punty, and we'll adhere the 2 irons. like I said, this is a temporary handle, so we want this a light connection so when we're finished, we can take it right back off that iron nice and clean. All right, so here we go. He'll center the 2 irons. Sometimes people ask, does the pipe ever get hot? Yeah, it does, towards the top. So that's why you see Chris holding that iron there with those tweezers. You can't touch that area. But you see Dane's hand, that shiny area. That's the kind of safe zone. Beautiful transfer. Let's give him a nice round of applause again. All right, so Chris will take a quick look, make sure it's running just on center here. If it's off center a little bit, you want to correct it as soon as you can.
That's how I want all of those. Yes. Yeah. I'm gonna have Josh work with these last ones. Once I put these leaves on here, Josh.
Okay.
3 leaves on first.
You got it. So we're going to attach some leaves here to that sphere.
I'm gonna flash once, but then I'll be ready.
Benjamin has already prepared one of the leaves. All right, so we got 1 leaf attached there. We'll do that 2 more times. So Benjamin's shaping that up to a somewhat of a point or taper. That way, when Chris applies it, he's got options. You can take a little bit, or you can take a lot of it. Just sets the gaffer up for success. So, number 2, contact, he'll pull it, cut it free. He cuts it on an angle like that to help him set it up to be that nice leaf shape. Flat crimps, tweezer move, give it a little gesture. So you notice he's going back and forth quite often now. The glass is thinned out, so it cools quicker. So that's why we have to keep a nice even temperature throughout the process now. And if he stays out too long and waits for that 3rd leaf and attaches it, sure, it might go on great, but when he goes back in that reheating chamber, if it's too cold, it can crack the entire thing. So it's always be better safe than sorry. Chris is just adjusting there. All right, so leaf number 3. All right, so I'm going to jump in here and help out now a little bit. We've ran through this a few times, so we kind of all have certain steps. We kind of know what's going to happen. You got it.
Dane, I'm going to have you flash there, bring to me. I'm going to slide it and torch it, and then I want you to flash one more time. 1 second. So we're going to pick a spot in between the leaves. I'm going to torch a little bit, just flip up and down with it.
Okay.
Side to side.
You got it.
All right, Dane.
So we're going to get ready to start attaching some of our stems. So Dane's going to start picking them up out of the garage. we're just going to flip back and forth. We're just kind of spot heating an area. Dane's got that warm there. He'll spot heat that as well. Down, now up. It's right there. One more flash right on your right. All right, yep. So it's kind of like a dance now. Yep. And up, yep, right there. So he attaches it right there with those tool, that claw tool, hold on to it. We go straight and down. All right, now I gotta do that 2 other times. Got a little movement there, Chris. So he'll adjust as necessary, making sure it's just the way he wants it. And then we'll let that kind of set up a little bit. We'll maintain a nice temperature, making sure it doesn't cool too much. We'll just kind of maintain the flashing temperature. So Dane will wait for that next cue for stem number 2.
All right, Dane, go ahead.
So usually you can just brush there to kind of wipe off any dust or residual. Sometimes things in the garage can pick up a little kiln shelf dust. All right, flipping. Flip. On your left, Dane. Hot side up, hot side down, and hot side up again. Attachment number 2. We'll go straight up and down again, right?
Stay level, Josh.
You got it. Staying level. That second one we just put on still warm, so he'll adjust it. There it is. Some great skill right here. You got it.
That's good. All right, Dane, go ahead.
So every time we set it down, we have to set it down very gentle. It's all delicate things now. Dane's got stem number 3. Flip. On your left, Dane.
Real quick flash, Josh.
Yep. So there's lots of communication between us 3 right now.
That's good, bud.
Making sure everybody's running just right. So hot side down and up. Straight up and down. Flash this. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful round of applause there. Here you go. I'm going to crack this other door here too. Create us a little more room.
Okay, Dan, you can get that other little ornament onto the left side of the garage, please.
So he's going to take a couple quick heats to get everything running back in tune, the same temperatures. And he'll do some finer adjustments to make sure it's just how he wants it. We're going to put another sphere to connect all three stems on the top. So if those are off a little bit, they won't have nice symmetrical to that sphere. So he's just telling Dane, go ahead and flash whenever you think it's comfortable for the temperature-wise. That just means come out of the garage into that reheating chamber. Looking great, Chris. Looking great. So we're going to do a quick little check. Dane will bring over that sphere. Make sure it's just right how we want it.
Let me just pour some honey, and then we'll do it. Nope. All right, Dane.
All right, so we have a little bit of clear glass acting as a glue bit. He'll take 3 little pieces from that. And then we'll stick that sphere right onto those 3 little areas. There we are. Beautiful. So back to the reheating chamber. Yeah. Nice round of applause again. So we'll kind of get some heat back into the piece, making sure it's running just right again. Adjusting those little glue bits. All right, so we're getting ready to put this stem away. We're going to put this into our hot box. It's just an annealer at 900 degrees to keep it warm.
Tap it off in there, but just when I put water on the honey, I just don't want it to.
And then we'll start making the top of our vessel. We'll pick this stem up here in a little bit. So Dane's got some gloves there. He'll stand by just in case this pops off the iron when we put water on it. Chris is going to tap this off himself into this annealer or hot box. Sometimes when we drop water on that connection in the back, it can sometimes release the entire object. All right, a little bit of water creates stress and weakness to that Punchy connection. When we went on there at a good temperature, should come off nice and clean also. All right. We'll go into our 900-degree oven. A light tap. Pops right off. Let's give him another round of applause. All right. So halfway done. Halfway done. All right, sorry about that. Had a little microphone change. So we had a question come on online. Do we ever get back pressure when we're blowing glass? Yeah, when things are really big, when we're blowing a really large sphere, when we blow, when we stop, there's a little bit of back pressure coming out. It's not a lot. It's not going to, push our hair back into our face or anything like that. But yeah, it's a common thing that happens on large scale glass. All right, so we're going to pick up another chunk of color here. Chris will start a collar again. So we can match the same color as our foot and our top of our vessel, the cup part. All right, sorry, we're going to do an overlay, not a collar. Sorry, there's two different ways to apply rod or bar. Either overlaying it over a bubble, otherwise picking it up on a collar. And that's what we did in the first part, the cup. We just stuck it right onto a little bit of clear glass and blew right through it. Now this second approach, we're going to do an overlay. So Chris is going to create a bubble. Dane is going to get the glass, the same color, that bar, nice and hot, and we'll overlay it across that bubble. So a little breath, cap of the finger will create pressure. And Chris cooled the glass nice and evenly so it has the same temperature across the piece. So that's what allowed that bubble to grow nice and evenly. If that shape is crooked or it's not the right temperature across the entire piece of glass, that bubble can shoot out the side or can shoot out the bottom, and you got a really crooked bubble. Just making an even bubble like that takes years of skill. So he'll cool that down. Dane's got that color almost nice and ready. He'll shorten that color bar by using that marver, make it nice and wide and short. That way when we drop it onto the bubble, Chris has a little bit of time to kind of allow it to flow evenly over that bubble. All right, so Benjamin is making a little bit of some dust from a soft brick. We're going to use that later for something called a dirty punty. We're going to roll our punty right before we attach it to a piece of glass through that dust, creating a little bit of a resist across the surface so it doesn't fully adhere. That way when we take it back off the iron, with a light tap it pops off really easy because of that soft brick dust. Some people roll it on the floor for a second too, create a little bit of dust on that as well. So we'll probably do both techniques here. All right, any other questions right now? Yeah. Yeah, so how large is the team? You see 4 of us helping up here on this one piece of glass and how complicated or intricate it is. So it depends on the piece. So, if something very large, we've worked on teams of 10 on one object before. Everybody has a job. Some people are, shielding someone's arm. That person might also be shielding someone else's arm. And that person might be shielding someone else's arm. So you can have 3 shields sometimes on very large things. Sometimes a second person is help rolling the pipe because it's very heavy when it's very large. Sometimes we have 2 people help rolling that pipe. But yeah, so it all depends on the piece though. The big Chihuly piece that's here in the museum, those are all kind of made in parts. So they're not, full scale, everything together, it's very large. But each piece is made individually. But we have the capability of working very large in this shop. We're at the Corning Museum of Glass, so we have a little bit of spoiled toys here. We have some very large equipment. So right over here is one of our largest pieces of equipment, the large reheating chamber, the Jumbo. So we have 8 sets of doors on that. So it's a very, very large diameter. We'll use it occasionally when we make very large things, but if we're not making something that large, we don't need to turn that on because there's so much heat coming out of that big piece of equipment. All right, so I'm going to toss off some of the microphone duties here to Dane. He's going to kind of narrate the rest of the process. I'm going to jump in and help Chris here. So thanks for listening to me. Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks, Josh. I saw a question over here. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, anybody working on trying to use more sustainable energy for glass blowing? There are some people that do it, yeah. You really need a lot of electricity, so I'm not sure how many solar panels it would take to run a shop. But if you're going to do that, you would definitely scale it down quite a bit. This is a small studio in the whole scape of things, but this is still quite a bit of energy being used. So I don't think you'd be able to power this studio with, solar power. But some things that people are doing that I know of is taking methane from capped landfills and using that to power a studio. All the studios that are like that, I know they might have one small furnace that melts about 100 pounds of glass and then one small glory hole or reheating chamber. But that's something that is being done today. Because it really uses a lot of energy. And when you look at the price of a piece of glass, that definitely goes into it. It's not cheap to run a studio. The fact that, these furnaces, the glory holes, we can keep on for the day and then turn off at the end of the day, come back in the morning, and it takes about maybe 2 hours to heat up. But the furnace has to keep running all the time. So, that's the real kind of the money suck of the whole process, Yeah, good question. You got a question for me. What is it, Amanda? What's the lifespan of all of the equipment that we have here on stage? Well, I think that really depends on the people that are using it and how well you take care of it. A good tool, if you take good care of it, it's going to last for a long time. We've had equipment for 10 years that we've been able to maintain, and they look almost new. So I think it's really all about just doing regular maintenance. I think that there's a lot of equipment that could probably last longer, although people are maybe trying to be a little bit more efficient. They might replace a reheating chamber with something like a more efficient burner. So there's things like that maybe you would upgrade for, but you could definitely continue to just do maintenance and keep a piece of equipment going for quite some time. Yeah, so we did a little handoff with a microphone just to give Josh a little break, but he's also been working with Chris for the last maybe few attempts of this. Chris has been practicing this shape a few times just to get the steps down, and it really is important to have your whole team on the same page. So Chris is an excellent glassblower, and he's also a really great communicator. If you haven't worked with him before, you can walk on stage, and he's really good about telling you what he needs and how he needs it on the fly. But of course, like a sports team that practices together all the time. It's just going to be a little more fluid if you've already run through those motions together. So I'm happy to step away as the piece comes together. It's going to be a really kind of intense little last few minutes of the piece. Anytime we're doing really technical work, like applying all those bits for the stem, I don't know about all of you, but I'm very quiet, I'm very focused, and it seems like there's a lot of tension in the room. You might feel that up here. We do this all the time, so we don't quite feel that tension so much, but we're definitely focused. We don't maybe talk so much about things that aren't glass blowing or things that aren't necessary while we're doing a really important step of the process. So, question, yeah. Yeah, why do we use cherry wood opposed to oak or maple? Cherry wood, for one, it grows around here, so it's the wood that we use. We don't have to use cherry wood, but something that makes cherry wood great for glass blowing tools is that because it's a slow-growing tree, it tends to have a very dense grain pattern. This makes the wood burn away slowly, but also a bit more even. So that's a great reason for it, but there's also a low sap or resin content in the wood. Now, if we were to use something that had a high resin content, as the wood burned away, it might leave a film on the surface of the glass. That might or might not really make a big difference in the glass, depending on the type of glass you're trying to make. I know people who work in all-white glass, and when they're doing that, they're really particular about everything in their studio. In fact, one of the favorite tools that we have up here is this pad that Chris is going to use, and that is just folded up newspaper. Well, a lot of us, we like to use newspaper that just has black print on it. So we wouldn't use the cartoon section because that dye, as it's burning, it might leave a little film on the surface of the glass. Well, people that are working in all white glass, you could really tell because it's such a stark contrast. They might decide to use newspaper that has no print on it, just so that there's not really that opportunity for the ink to get on the glass. Yep. Now, Chris is making a bowl for the top of this piece, and he's running through the steps of inflating the glass, but we are going to have to break the glass free from the iron eventually. And this little constriction that he's starting to create right near the head of the iron, that is our weak spot. I like to tell people that glass blowing really doesn't have much to do with blowing or inflating glass. It's more about shaping the glass with different material, with different tools, but most importantly, this process, it's about temperature management. If you can create temperature differentials throughout the glass, you can control the temperature very precisely, you can create a number of different shapes. This is a really common way to see people blow glass now, where Chris is sitting at the bench, he's shaping the glass, and he's having his assistant inflate the glass. One of the perks of doing it this way is that as the glass is inflating, it's always going to inflate at the hottest area. Well, in an ideal world, we have a temperature in the bubble that's equal all the way throughout, but it just doesn't always happen. So if the temperature isn't even, and Chris is having somebody inflate, it allows him to watch the bubble inflate. He can tell where it's maybe a little hotter, and he can adjust for that. Oftentimes, if the glass is blowing out in one area, we might put a tool there, like that newspaper, to constrict the glass, to hold that glass from inflating. This way it's going to inflate somewhere else first. Yeah, this constriction, it's one of those things where you kind of eventually learn that it's just one of the most important steps in the process. And if you don't get it right, you can spend an hour creating a beautiful piece with wonderful color patterns. And if you don't have this correct, you might not be able to successfully get that glass off the end of the iron. Well, naturally, when glass inflates, it really likes to be that bulbous kind of round shape. And this is we call it a standard sphere. It's a basic shape that we create. And from here, we're going to start to change the profile of the bubble. If Chris wanted to make a tall vessel, maybe he'd heat the glass and hold his iron towards the ground so that that hot glass begins to drip or run away from the piece. Chris is doing the opposite now, though. Holding the glass up in the air, he allows that glass just to settle back on itself. It becomes a bit squatter and a lot wider. This shape that he's creating, a low form like this, it's one of the more challenging shapes to create in glass. One is just getting the temperature equal to create the shape, but also because it's such a wide, low shape, it's very hard to spot heat just the area that you need to move as we're opening the bowl. And you'll see that a little bit later here. So because of that, the whole thing ends up getting a little bit hot. And if you're not careful, you might end up getting a kind of little bit of an off-center shape. But Chris is really skilled. He's been doing this for, again, about 20 years. And this is a shape that he really loves to make. It's a great skill builder. Yeah, you know, there's a lot of different ways. I think, you know, my path in glassblowing has been all on-the-job training. Chris found glass in college. He actually went to art school, and I think that he just took one elective in glassmaking, but he did a lot of stone sculpture in college. He was really into that. But then after college, Chris was able to get a job working for somebody as an assistant, and he was basically there just to help this one person make their work day in and day out. I think the way that you gain skill in glassblowing is through repetition. So having a job where you're doing the same thing over and over again, it may sound monotonous, but that's really just how you master anything, right? Going to art school really has a lot of benefits too. You know, it teaches you to think like an artist, so your ideas have some substance. All right, so they're going to add a little bit of glass on the bottom here. These little connection bits, there's a lot of different names for them. Sometimes we call them avolios. Avolios are really kind of a traditional Venetian-style technique, and they often look like little kind of hourglass shapes. Really, they're used as connection points, and I think it looks really great because it separates the bowl from the stem, and oftentimes the stem from the foot. So, and adds a certain bit of elegance to that piece. Now, we really can't open this bowl up while we're connected to that iron, so what we're going to do in just a moment here is we're going to transfer the glass to a separate iron. And we've made a few punties already in this process, so Josh is going to start that punty right now. This is one of the most important connections that you'll make in the piece. You know, the punty has to be just the right temperature. The temperature really determines the strength of the connection. So if you make a connection that's very hot, it's going to be very strong. They'll fuse together. Those two pieces of glass bond, and they don't ever want to break apart. Now, sometimes that's exactly what we're looking for. Let's say, you know, we're adding a stem onto a cup or something like that. We don't want that connection to break. So we make sure that that's a very strong connection. But this here is temporary. We don't want it to break later on. Or we do want it to break later on. So Chris is going to make this just a little bit colder of a connection. Because of that, it'll be a fragile connection. The trick is to not make it too cold or too fragile. Now, at the end of the day, this is Chris's piece, and as the gaffer, we kind of just have this code that, you know, the gaffer takes responsibility for everything that happens on the shop floor because they're the ones that are in charge of everything. But with that being said, it makes things a lot easier if you have a team that is skilled and also a team that you work with all the time. So Josh brings over that punty. Looks like a good connection there. Watch this, a light little tap, the glass breaks free. And I think the team deserves a nice hand for that. You got to be a good glass breaker if you want to become a good glass maker. All right, well, this will be one of the longer heats in the show. You know, we have the glass at probably, I'm going to guess, somewhere around 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. Our glass begins to kind of stiffen up, become solid right around 1200 degrees. And we need the glass to be solid for us to fracture it from the iron. A good working range might be about 16 to 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, but we really never know the temperature of the glass while we're up here. We're just making educated guesses. And the longer you've been doing this, the more times you've failed, and that all helps you make the right guess. Now, something that you have to think about a lot, and you could be a very skilled glass worker, but maybe you're not so good at creating proportions. Putting something together like this, it's really challenging to think about the stem and the foot that you just made and then try to match the correct size for the bowl. Chris, of course, he's really skilled. He's really good at doing this, but he has too much glass right now. So we're going to remove some of that glass in a few minutes here. He will be trimming through the top of the piece, so he's got a set of shears that will allow him to do this. People ask us all the time what it feels like to cut through hot glass, and I think it kind of feels like cutting through an orange peel. However, you have to make sure that the glass is hot. As soon as it starts to cool down, it gets a little crunchy, and then eventually it's solid. So because of this, Chris has a very limited amount of time to do this step. Yeah. He makes this look too easy. And if anybody out there has blown glass before, you know that it's not that easy. But that's how it is. If you watch somebody that's skilled, they make it look effortless. And if you watch a beginner, they make the show very short. So you might be able to see this bit of a temperature differential that I was talking about. The top, it's really hot, but you can see this gradient of kind of glow of color in the glass. And the bottom, it's a bit colder. It's still looking gray almost. If he doesn't get the temperature just right, the curve, it's not going to be very gradual. You might notice some kind of steps in it, and it just won't look right. So this is one of those shapes. A lot of the Italians, this shape is called a tazza in Venetian-style glassmaking. They say that you don't find the tazza finds you. And really, the glass is controlling the pace of everything. So you take your cues from the glass all the time. I think that's a really beautiful shape right there. And watching somebody that's skilled while they're on their way to their final shape, you might see a number of different shapes. That's oftentimes kind of the process of somebody learning. This, maybe 10 years ago, was the shape that Chris was trying to make, but he just keeps tweaking it a little bit every time. You know, he keeps trying to refine his process constantly. Now, this set of tools that he has in his hands, they're very similar to those steel-bladed tools, the jacks that he was using earlier. The wood is a really nice material to work with at this point for a few reasons. One, wood is not going to steal the heat from the glass as quickly as our steel-bladed tools. So it allows Chris just a few extra seconds of shaping time. And a few seconds might not sound like a lot, but seconds are everything in glass making. And then the other is that they've got rounded blades. They're not sharp like those steel-bladed jacks, so they're less likely to leave any marks on the surface of the material. You can see that he's kind of like doing a little shaping. It doesn't look like the shape is changing a whole lot right now, but he's doing this shaping and cooling and just trying to get the temperature right all the way throughout the glass before he reaches that final shape. Now, you might be thinking, we've got this bowl. How are we going to connect the bowl to the stem when we've got a punchy connected to the bottom of the bowl? We're going to have to do another punchy transfer. And this is when things start to get pretty interesting. Beautiful shape. What do you all think of that? This next punchy, I mean, we call it an inside punchy because it is a punchy that is on the inside of the bowl. Things start to move a little differently off the end of the iron when you have a punchy on the inside. All that weight is not off the iron, it's actually back towards the iron. So when you stop turning, if that punchy is hot, the glass, it moves a little bit differently. It kind of moves in an opposite way. So it's something that, you know, when you've done it for a while, you don't think anything of it, but in the beginning, it's a little hard to get your head wrapped around it. This next punchy, though, it's got to be perfect. If this punchy is a little too hot, this is the one where it really counts, because if this punchy is too hot, it's never going to break off in one piece once we have that stem added on to the bottom, that stem and foot. Now you see Josh roll the glass on the table, helping to pull all that glass off the end of the iron. He rolls the glass on the floor, and this seems a little weird, but we're doing this to pick up a little bit of dust, a little bit of dirt on the side of the punchy. This way, we have a smaller, really hot contact patch. This is one way to make that punchy a little bit more fragile. So he attaches it. A drop of water stresses the glass thermally. It just takes a light tab. Let's give it up for the team one more time. All right, so now we really just have to grab this stem and foot out of the box and connect it. Sounds easy, right? Not so much. Chris, are you going to need my help for any bit of this process?
You know what? Well, just at the very end, I'm going to have you paddle with me.
Yep. Yeah. Well, if you need me for anything else, I'm here for you. You got it. We got a little question about the temperature of the furnace. You good? And yeah, so we have the furnace. We actually lowered it 100 degrees from what we normally run this. Just because, first of all, this color is a soft color and it heats up quickly. But also we've got all of these really, yep, we need to turn off the, I'll do it, I got it. We have all these really delicate connections, so we want to make sure that they don't get too hot and start to move around on us too fast. Now you see Chris with a little brush there, a little broom, and he's using that broom just to dust off the glass. The insulated brick that we have inside our furnace, or I'm sorry, inside our pickup box, that's the little annealing box that Chris stored the stem in. It's a really airy, light brick, and it breaks apart pretty easy. So sometimes we might get a little dust on there, and if we heat it up too much, it bonds. It sticks right onto the surface. So as long as we catch it in time, we're able to just give it a little brush, and it goes right away. Here you go. Now, to make sure that we have a solid connection, we want to really have hot temperature on both the bottom of the bowl and the top of the stem. So you see Chris and Josh, they're doing this kind of process of just going back and forth. They're switching back and forth, building the heat in just that area. All right, so here we go. We're going to go for that connection. All right, so we got a little break there at the area where we had those two, or there's the three little glue bits that we put on, right between the tops of the flowers and that little kind of decorative ball there. So what we're going to do is we're just going to heat those areas up again. We'll reconnect them, get a stronger connection using the torch. I'm not sure if Josh touched base on this earlier, but when we're working with the material, we have to maintain a minimum temperature. That's somewhere around 900 degrees Fahrenheit for our formula of glass. We just want to make sure the glass doesn't cool too quickly, because if it does, the glass starts to shrink. And if the surface is cooling faster than the core, different areas begin to shrink at different rates. It pulls or pops the glass apart. All right, so we've got that on there. It's not over yet, though. We've got a little bit of adjustment to do before we're finished. So we're making sure we got a good seal there. You can see it's not centered yet. We'll take a good heat here, and then we're just going to make sure that the lip and the foot are running very even. Yep, sounds good. You know, we always say in glass blowing, it's not about what you can make, it's about what you can fix. Anybody can get lucky once.
Hey, can you like that torch and just get ready to go watch how much I'm going to canvas for you?
You got it.
I'm going to pull that with the tweezers, and I just want to burn it off the end there.
Yep. We'll do it from the bottom side.
Yep.
All right. Back in business. So you can see that the stem, it is moving around a little bit. And believe it or not, at this point in the process, that's what we want. If it's moving, it means it's warm. It's not in danger of breaking apart. Okay, sounds good. You got it. So we're going to have to touch the glass with some tools, and I was just torching the jacks and the paddle. This way they're a little bit warmed up. They're less likely to thermally shock the glass.
All right, Benjamin, it's going to come off after we do this. All right, buddy.
All right. Here we go. Into our oven it goes. All right, let's give it up for Chris Rochelle and the team.